Here at ParanormalScholar.com is a story by Eric Roten entitled John Titor, the Time Traveler from 2036, who spoke of World War III, time travel, and superverses. And Mr. Roten begins. The poster's name was John Titor, a man who described himself as an American soldier from the future. The reason for traveling back in time, he said, was to retrieve an old computer which contained a component of vital importance to his future. This was a story which was maintained throughout further posts, which appeared in great number across numerous online forums. For many who have researched this enigma, the name Titor has been an incessant source of fascination and obsession. This is in part due to the rich details his story provides about our future and the nature of the universe in which we live. In his forum posts, Titor claimed that we inhabit a superverse, where every possibility is happening concurrently across an infinite number of parallel universes. By traveling through different times and dimensions to the past, Titor stated that he would never be able to return back to the exact dimension from which he came. Instead, he expected to travel to one different, but very similar to his original timeline. The reason for this, he explained, is a divergency effect. Our universe is 2.5% divergent from his universe. Thank you, Zacchaeus Hundley, for the super chat. Much appreciated, Zacchaeus. This means that Titor's own history, recorded in various forums from November 2000 to March 2001, references a future which is 2.5% different from our own. Titor described how he was an American historian with a specialism in the 20th century. His academic funding had been provided by the Army, while he was an enlisted soldier. By the year 2036, he claimed, time travel had been developed by the government. It had been used for several years by the time of his own expedition. Titor said he had been chosen to be sent to the year 1975 with the mission of retrieving an IBM 5100, a portable computer which contained an outdated piece of coding that was needed in the future. I believe it was an outdated piece of hardware. The Army had chosen Titor because of his historical knowledge, and because his grandfather had been one of the people who had worked on the very computer needed. Worked on its invention. This apparently is the very computer here. It is. This is an image of the IBM 5100. Its storage media, cassette tape. During the course of the mission in 1975, Titor made an obscure promise to his grandfather that he would return to the year 2000. While no details are given as to the nature of this promise, Titor maintained it was for personal reasons. Such was how it came to be in the year 2000. John Titor shared his story on the internet. So how likely is it that a future society would desperately need access to an outdated computer technology? While this part of the story may seem unusual, in 2002, NASA experienced a similar dilemma. To finish building their booster testing machines, they had to buy outdated medical equipment on eBay to scavenge their now obsolete Intel 8086 chips from the 1970s. In the case of the machine Titor was sent to retrieve. Dinkum Aussie just gifting 5 NightTerrors memberships. Thank you, most gracious sir. Dinkum Aussie, thank you, sir. In the case of the IBM 5100, the time traveler described a special feature of the machine, which had never been publicly revealed. Bizarrely, some of these computers are said to hold a special code which stopped being used after the 1970s. Maybe it is coding. In 2004, a few years after the Titor mystery, Bob Dubke, an engineer who helped design the IBM 5100, did indeed confirm that such a feature existed. The fact that the IBM 5100 is portable also makes it a better candidate than its far larger cousins for this alleged one-man time travel expedition. As his motive for needing to travel back in time was somewhat logical, those communicating with Titor on forums at the time were drawn further into his story. As well as describing his personal history, John Titor also revealed information about a future marred by warfare. A common theme in all of his posts is the detail he provides in describing future events. The future, according to John Titor: Civil War and World War III. The year 2008 was a general date by which time everyone will realize the world they thought they were living in was over. The Civil War in the U.S. will start in 2004. Quote, I would describe it as having a Waco-type event every month that steadily gets worse. The conflict will consume everyone in the U.S. by 2012, and then in 2015, with a very short World War III. The Waco event to which Titor referred was a siege in 1993 by American federal and state authorities against a religious sect in Texas. During the crisis, hundreds of federal agents attacked their compound. Overall, at least 80 members of the sect were killed, including children. At the time, the siege was widely regarded as a landmark event, which turned the minds of many Americans against the federal government. By referencing it, especially with it still in recent memory, Titor insinuated the rising of tensions between local and central authorities. Indeed, the time traveler described how, as a young man, his life was defined by a war which pitted the countryside of the United States against cities controlled by federal authorities. According to Titor, until 2015, this conflict was limited to guerrilla warfare. Across the nation, those living in the countryside took up arms against perceived federal abuses of individual rights. Quote, when the civil conflict started and got worse, people generally decided to either stay in the cities and lose most of their civil rights under the guise of security, or leave the cities for more isolated and rural areas. Our home was searched once, and the neighbor across the street was arrested for some unknown reason. That convinced my father to leave the city. From the age of 8 to 12, we lived away from the cities and spent most of our time in a farm community with other families, avoiding conflict with the federal police and National Guard. By that time, it was pretty clear that we were not going back to what we had, and the division between the cities and the country was well defined. Due to the rising stakes of the conflict, a military career was an obvious choice for the young time traveler. Quote, I joined a shotgun infantry in 2011. I served with the Fighting Diamondbacks for about 4 years. The Civil War ended when Russia attacked the U.S. cities, China, and Europe. End quote. The conflict then became nuclear, with America's enemies using nuclear weapons against many cities across the U.S. Quote, nuclear war is a very undesirable thing, but it is not the end of the world. There are areas and cities we can't enter, and the environment did suffer a great deal of damage, but we are recovering. Is not Hiroshima a thriving city today? Some say Hiroshima. The major physical effects include skin cancer, infertility, infection, etc. Almost everyone has some sort of physical remnant from the war. Titor stated that after the war, the United States reformed itself. The United States is still a representative of quote, the U.S. is still a representative of a republic in 2036, but it was touch and go for a while. After the war, the U.S. had divided into 5 general areas based on their economic and defensive strengths. Many people blamed the government organization for the war. And the last Constitutional Congress was held in 2020 to officially scrap the Constitution and start over. Fortunately, this exercise in anger pointed out how hard it was to come up with anything better. It was decided the document itself was not at fault. As a result, there have been a few small changes to the Constitution and the executive branch, but you would easily recognize the new government. The average citizen is more educated about the Constitution and more aware of the rights and responsibilities it gives them. Federal power has been decentralized, and the focus of daily politics is in the state senates. Federal law has also been streamlined, but it is much harder to change or make additions to. End quote. In the aftermath of the war, Titor explained how survivors continue to value family and small communities. In 2036, life was described as being very different from what current society may imagine it to be. Quote, in 2036, I live in Central Florida with my family, and I'm currently stationed at an Army base in Tampa. The people that survived grew closer together. Life is centered on the family and then the community. I cannot imagine living even a few hundred miles away from my parents. There is no large industrial complex creating masses of useless food and recreational items. Food and livestock is grown and sold locally. People spend much more time reading and talking together face to face. Religion is taken seriously, and everyone can multiply and divide in their heads. The invention of time travel. With peace reinstated, time travel was invented by the year 2034. However, Titor pointed out that in his future, it has not yet been made available for public use. Although it is reserved solely for official purposes, the general public is aware of its existence. In his forum posts, Titor is happy to discuss time travel at length, including its moral implications, which he said are discussed in his own time. Titor claimed that the state, for example, had considered using time travel as a sort of punishment. Throughout all his forum posts, it is clear that John Titor, whoever he is willing to provide much detail about the alleged future. He gives opinions freely and is happy to answer questions. Yet he had no desire to change the future to come. On the contrary, in his posts he often stated that he believed the coming conflict will be something which would help America grow in a positive way. Quote, I think the war will be good for you and your society. I don't want to stop it. End quote. Throughout his correspondence, there is something of a callousness when Titor speaks of the war to come. In one private message, he even revealed that he hates this time, seeing it as a period when people had it all, yet squandered it out of ignorance. So why, if real, would a veteran of such an active time in history so openly reveal events to come? The question becomes all the more mind-boggling when it is apparent that Titor does not care about being believed. Quote, I realize there is no way for anyone to believe me with absolute certainty, so I hope I'm at least entertaining. I realize my claims are a bit ridiculous, but my intent is not really to be believed. In fact, over this medium, it is impossible to prove I'm a time traveler. Therefore, it's impossible to believe, end quote. Yet far from being apathetic, Titor revealed he was afraid of being believed. Quote, "The reason time travelers do not reveal themselves is because your society scares the hell out of us. We do not want to end up in a cement room on a permanent supply of sodium pentothal, as men with lab coats poke at our machine with a screwdriver." Titor's knowledge of science and technology is another aspect which seemingly adds to the case's legitimacy. The alleged time traveler is very forthcoming with information about his machine. He even went so far as to post online photocopies of the manual, supposedly developed by General Electric. As well as oh, that's a picture of the manual right there. Huh. Pictures from the manual. As well as the manual, he also uploaded several photographs of something he claimed to be the machine, which he took in the present day. This says supposedly a photo of the time machine installed in a car. Titor described it as weighing 500 pounds. Oh yeah, there's the seat of the car right there. Nice bucket seat. And there's the driving wheel. So it takes up the whole passenger seat. Oh, interesting. Theoretically speaking, all of what John Titor claimed in his posts is possible. One person by the name of Martin Pullman took Titor's ideas and documents one step further, and in 2004, filed for a U.S. patent for a time machine. It was published in 2006, and has since been considered an interesting, albeit theoretical, application for the possibility of time travel. All of this increases the stakes. Regardless of the persona of John Titor, his future does touch upon one aspect of American history, which is very true: the inherent conflict between the countryside and the cities. Such a clash of ideas has been present since the foundation of the U.S., the rights of individual states being one of the factors that led to the American War between the states. This conflict between countryside and cities is not going to go away anytime soon either.